everyone. This is Fadi, and I'd like to welcome you back to this series about the Islamic original sin dilemma. And of course, if you've been tracking with us, you would have noticed that we have been making our case from the Islamic sources sometimes to prove that Islam teaches the existence of original sin. Now, here today, we are going to talk about a very interesting verse from the Quran that shows that even the Prophet of Islam himself wasn't born in a state of purity as Islam teaches, or with a state of this original disposition. Now, what is that? Islam, to contradict the original sin, teaches something called fitra. What is fitra? It's the original disposition. What does that mean? You're born in a state of innocence and purity, and you gravitate towards Allah and towards Islam or the ways of Allah in a straight path. That's naturally, you're born with this tendency. But somehow, Islam actually contradicts itself and says that mankind needs guidance. So if mankind needs guidance, that tells me that they really don't know how to make it on their own. And therefore, they are unable to find the truth. So let's say the tendency basically meant that they needed someone to now show them where to go because they have the tendency to go, and therefore they want to follow the straight path. Fine. Then the prophet who is sent to them, or the messenger, should know better who is God, and therefore he would know, or he himself, this prophet, would know how to guide him and take him there. You would expect that, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of sending a prophet, because the prophet knows the way, and he's sent by Allah to guide those who have the tendency to find the way. Fine. Now let's take a look at the Prophet of Islam. This is what I'm going to show you now in this slide on the screen. It is chapter 42 of the Quran, verse 52. I'm going to read it for you first. It's the Palmer translation. And I usually choose the translations that will fit with what we're trying to explain to you so that you don't labor in trying to find the right translation that matches basically the Arabic. This one fits what the Arabic says. I try to always find the translation that goes with the Arabic. As you know, it is really hard to find a faithful Quranic translation because the translators sometimes tend to manipulate these translations either because of their lack of understanding of what the Arabic is or because they recognize there's a problem and they try to water it down. This one by Palmer, and Palmer, by the way, is one of those good ones because he tried to be as close as possible to the Arabic. Chapter 42, verse 52, speaking about Muhammad, look what it says. And thus have we inspired thee by a spirit at our bidding. Allah is speaking to Muhammad saying, we, Allah, inspired you, Muhammad, by a spirit of our bidding. Now, Muslims will argue that the spirit is the angel Gabriel. Fine, no problem. Thou did not know what the book was, nor the faith. Wow. I mean, let me stop right here. I mean, look what it's saying here. Muhammad needed guidance because he did not know the book, that's the Quran, and the faith in who? In Allah. This is the man that was sent to guide Muslims. Somehow he himself didn't know a book or his own book and didn't know his God. And you're telling me this is the guy that was sent to you to help you in your state of purity and original disposition to find God and his guidance and his instructions. Now think about this for a second. Is this a guy that you really feel like you can put your trust in and bank on him? As a matter of fact, this is the same guy who, if you go, and I'm going to write it down for you here, if you go to the Quran, chapter 46, verses 8 and 9, this is what he says. I'm going to summarize it and paraphrase it. He says, I do not know what's going to happen to me, nor to you. Is this the guy you want to follow? Compare this to Jesus, who says, I know where I'm going, he says. I go back to the Father, he says. I came from heaven. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. Which one do you want to follow? The one who's confident and knows where he's going, and if I go, I prepare a place for you, and when I come, I'll take you, and where I am, you will be. I mean, all these things, just go to John 14. Oh, as a matter of fact, my Muslim friends, you use John 14 all the time to tell us that the Holy Spirit in there and the Comforter is Muhammad. Really? So just go and read John 14, starting from verse 1, and take it all the way down, and you judge if that's talking about a person like Muhammad, by the way. or is it talking about God? Okay? But anyway, that will be for another topic. We'll leave that when Sam Shamoun is here, because he just gets overly excited when he talks about these topics. Let's go back again to our verse at hand. So, apparently, according to the Quran, the Prophet of Islam didn't know anything about his God or his instructions. And the God of Islam is saying, but we made it a light whereby we guide whom we will of our servants. So even the servants of Allah sometimes are not guided. Somehow the God of Islam feels like he can guide some of them and not guide all of them, which tells me that not all the servants of Allah, by the way, have been guided. So some of them must have misguided people because they didn't know, according to the teaching of Islam, that the God of Islam didn't guide all of them. And verily, the God of Islam continuing to speak to Muhammad, verily, thou shalt surely be guided into the right way. Which way? The right way, the straight path, as-sirat al-mustaqim. Okay, this is what Muhammad asks you to pray daily and asking Allah from chapter 1, Ihdina, guide us to the straight path. And yet Muhammad himself needed guidance to that straight path. And yet, even if this is true, why did he continue to pray this prayer daily? He would have repeated it 17 times if he prayed the 5 prayers alone, not to mention any other times. You, if you pray the daily prayers, you would repeat this request to be guided to the straight path 5 times, 5 prayers, 17 times, because each prayer you repeated multiple times. Why in the world would you need that if you already have someone who guided you to the straight path? You see why this is problematic? You see why this is another confirmation that even your guide needed guidance? Even your guide was sinful and needed someone to guide him back to the state of purity. Let's continue now and see what the commentators are saying about chapter 42, verse 52. Look at this slide. This is once again Ibn Abbas, the cousin of Muhammad, who lived with Muhammad, and look what he is saying about this. And thus have we inspired in thee, Muhammad, that's his basically clarifying, the English clarifying that this passage is talking about Muhammad, as spirit of our command, meaning we sent you Gabriel. The spirit that came to guide you, Muhammad, was the angel Gabriel. With what? With the book that you needed to be guided by, the Quran. Now, that's a really interesting thing. I'm not making an argument right now for the Bible and the Quran, but let me ask you this, my Muslim friends. If Muhammad came to reveal the Quran to you, why did he need to know about the Quran in the first place? And when did this Quran existed? And did he receive it as a whole book and he just piecemealed it to you? What is going on here? These are the questions you need to ask yourself. Let's continue now. It said, thou knowest not what the scripture was. You have no clue what the Quran was. You did not know what the Quran was before the coming of Gabriel. But I thought, according to the teaching of Islam, humankind is born with really this original disposition towards Allah and His guidance. Allah and the book, basically. But even Muhammad didn't know that. And he needed guidance. You didn't know what the Quran was before the coming of Gabriel to you, nor did you know how to recite the Quran before it came to you, nor what the faith, meaning you did not know the call to Allah's divine oneness. Divine oneness. This is powerful. You know why? Because Muhammad endorsed idolatry and he worshipped idols. And here the Quran says, until Allah revealed himself to him, he didn't know that there is one God. He always worshipped with his tribe idols that existed in Mecca and in other places. So this is the guy that I keep hearing all the time. He was sent as a guide to mankind. Does this sound to you that this is someone that knew his God beforehand, and he's the one who wanted you to follow him all the way to on a straight path back to God? You be the judge. So we're going to continue now with this commentary. We have made it, i.e., meaning the Quran, a light, an exposition of commands and of prohibitions, the lawful and the unlawful, the truth and the falsehood, whereby by means of the Quran, we, Allah, guide whom we will, whoever deserve it of our bondmen, and lo, thou verily does guide, do call unto a right path, a straight path, through religion. God is speaking to Muhammad that we have decided that you're worthy to be guided, and therefore now we're going to show you how you yourself need to be guided so that you can become a guide to others. Once again, I make the argument that if Muhammad was born in a state of fitra, why would the Quran talk about him in such a fashion? Now, we shared with you select passages from the Quran that confirms the existence of original sin. I'm going to close here by showing you additional passages in the Quran just as a summary for you, and you can go and do your own study on that. In chapter 14 of the Quran, verse 34, it says that man is unjust, meaning man, humanity in nature, they're born this way with the tendency to be unjust. That's sinful nature. In chapter 80 of the Quran, verse 17, it says man is ungrateful, born with the tendency to be ungrateful, sinful. Man fails to do what he was commanded to do. Chapter 80, verse 23. Man is inclined towards evil, not righteousness. Chapter 12, verse 53. Man is lost. Chapter 103, verses 2 and 3. Sin is universal. Everyone is sinner. All have sinned. The Quran confirms this. Confirm it in chapter 16, verse 61. And finally, man is incapable of purifying himself, of leading himself, of guiding himself, except you need someone to take you there, according to chapter 24, verse 21. All of these things confirm what the Bible teaches, and this is why I want to appeal to you that unless you know Christ, you have no hope of walking that straight path, of making it all the way to heaven and be in the presence of God for all of eternity. In the next episodes, we will begin to unpack to you what does that mean and why the sinlessness of Christ, acknowledged by the Quran, is important. Until we meet again, have a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss future videos. And please consider becoming a patron on patreon.com/CIRA International.